Welcome to On the Soul's Terms podcast, a weaving of astrology, Greek mythology, and depth psychology. I'm Chris Skidmore, an astrologer, psychotherapist, and craniosacral therapist living in Ubud, Bali. Today I'm joined by Kari Hohne. Kari is a dream analyst and expert on the Eastern and Western archetypes that inspire our dreams and oracles. Through her website, Cafe or Soul, she bridges the gap between an appreciation for nature and the spiritual journey. Her online I Ching is ranked number 1 in internet searches, and she's the author of 7 books that discuss dreams, ancient astrology, and the archetypes of the tarot. She's also written translations of the Tao Te Ching and I Ching. Our conversation took place on April 22nd as Jupiter, the planet of wisdom, and Uranus, the planet of innovation, got together in the sky. It's a lively chat that covers a lot of ground, from the flow of the Tao to Babylonian symbols that predate the zodiac we know today, and a whole lot in between. As a heads up, Kari lives out in the wilderness, and so we have a few small blips in the connection during the course of our chat, but nothing too extreme. To find out more about Kari, just go down to the show notes and I'll leave links to her website and her YouTube video and her Amazon page for her books. She's truly a fascinating figure, and I hope you enjoy listening to this conversation as much as I did having it. I'm really delighted to talk today with someone who reached out to me, or her assistant reached out to me, and just wanted to be part of the conversation on here. Fascinating human being who I'm just getting to know really this morning. But I'm introducing you, the audience, to Kari Hohne. Kari, welcome to the show, and I'd love you to give us an introduction to who are you and what are the threads that you're walking in this life?
Well, Chris, thank you. It's nice to be on your show, and it's nice to meet you. I basically am most well known as a dream analyst. I mean, I've been analyzing dreams for people all over the world. Obviously, once the internet started, but so I've just done a lot of research and have written a lot of books about dream interpretation. But I also write a lot about nature's wisdom. I practice kind of Taoism, which I see as the philosophy of removing boundaries. Really, it's inspired by nature, and there's every little thing that we come to meet in nature, is like another living entity that has something to teach us. So I get really inspired by that. I have translated the Tao Te Ching. I have, I think, the number 1 I Ching. If you want a free online I Ching reading on the internet. My site it comes up. My website's Cafe au Soul, and I guess because of my work in dream analysis, I've had to really explore a lot of our Eastern and Western archetypes to understand the evolution of our symbolism that appears in astrology, tarot, the Western version of archetypes, and the Eastern version. And so I kind of have. In fact, I'm working on a new book that's really looking at why we can't find the written records of our ancient wisdom, because I believe it was something that came to us in dreams, and we can talk more about that if you want later. But so yeah, I have like 7 books on things from nature, dreams, Taoism, that sort of thing.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, already there's so many dream doors to sort of open up and walk through. I'd love to start, actually. It just I feel pulled towards talking about the Tao Te Ching and the I Ching and this wisdom coming through China. And, that's something I haven't really opened up much about in the podcast so far, but it's an area of deep fascination for me. And so you've actually translated these. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, everybody, there's definitely, different interpretations of the text, and the I Ching is a difficult text to translate and understand because it has, lines that go with it. I can describe that more in detail, but so it's really, I had studied the ancient Chinese philosophers, prior to delving into the I Ching. So I was able to see a lot of the ideas that were reappearing in the line interpretations. And, Taoism compared to philosophy, in the West, they were looking at everything around them and personifying it or anthropomorphizing it, or everything was in man's terms, where
Mm.
it was just the opposite. And this is before Buddhism came into China. So this is really going back to like 2500 BC, 2000, 1000 BC. The Taoists were looking at nature to understand the human journey. So they
Wow.
were like, yeah, so it wasn't like there weren't a lot of deities, like a lot of the things that were offshoots of Taoism, you know, Tai Chi, acupuncture, the different elements of, those came later, but the original Taoist ideas were really were focused on nature, and so the I Ching is called the Book of Changes. That's how it translates,
Mm.
and it's basically the idea that nothing ever comes to stop. In fact, the end of the book, it's like hexagram. The last hexagram comes before the second to the last hexagram before completion. After completion, they just to kind of remind you that it just keeps going on and on. In fact, somebody wrote me this morning. I got an email from somebody asking me about, is it possible to, when the two hexagrams appear, how do you know what time sense is going to unfold? And I had to explain to them that Taoist philosophy doesn't have a linear sense of time.
Mm.
We're not getting on a train and going to the future, and the I Ching, when you use it as an oracle, it acts like an ancient master, like a Zen master, like that uses koans to like provoke enlightenment rather than
Mm.
give you answers. If you use tarot in the West, that the cards or 78 cards or whatever, based a lot on kind of the Western mythologies and stuff. You can sense of past, present, future, but all assume that you have that this is where it's trending, but you have the power to change the outcome. So the I Ching, all of the principles in the I Ching are drawn on the elements of nature, like the wind and the joyous
Mm.
lake, and the deep water, the mysterious water, the clinging fire. But one of the most fascinating things, because I've studied a lot of ancient texts, like the Popol Vuh out of the Mayan world, I came with shamans around the world and going through some of these ancient ideas. But what's most fascinating about the I Ching is you know yin and yang, right? The
Yeah.
open. Okay, so in the I Ching, yang is represented as a solid line, and yin
Mm.
is represented as an open line.
Hmm.
And so the hexagrams in the I Ching are built from the bottom up. There's 6 lines, and based on whether it's an old yin, a young yin, whatever, it can give you like they call it the 10,000 things. You can get
Mm.
like a million different, possible outcomes from 2 lines, from two, you know, and Leibniz in the 17th century, he was like a scientist. He basically had the I Ching hexagram and was kind of turning it sideways. And he was really fascinated at that two things could lead to so many, outcomes.
Mm.
And that's where binary code came from. Binary code that's driving our technology,
Oh
our
my
mobile
God.
network. It's ones and zeros. He got
Mm.
it from the I Ching. So that to me is like a beautiful example of why our ancient wisdom, is so important today,
Wow.
that, and so,
I really
so
love
that,
that. Yeah, I'm just thinking about how this kind of modern era that we're wandering into, and uh, with Pluto moving into Aquarius, and these moments and the Great Conjunction of
today, didn't it just start today?
uh,
This,
it was.
the Uranus
Oh
Jupiter
yeah, there's the
conjunction.
Jupiter Uranus conjunction, and so there's all these
Yeah.
kinds of things that are leading us in the direction or showing us these kind of Aquarian images, I feel, or Uranian images, technology, AI, things moving in the direction, in that particular direction, some of which has a beauty to it and some of which is scary.
Mhm.
But I do think about the image of Aquarius as ones and zeros, in the sense of, I once had a very Aquarian client say to me that the way she understands reality is through true false sentiments or true false statements.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like making your way through the labyrinth with true, false, true, 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 false, 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 true, false, this kind of thing.
Technology. Yeah.
Exactly. It's very technical. But then what you're bringing here, which is something I haven't heard before, and it actually something in it feels very soulful, where the very heart of that or the roots of that actually go back to the I Ching and which is yin yang, and as you say, those two give birth to the 10,000 things, don't they? As they say in
As
that
it said,
book.
right?
Yeah, and I love that. That, but then you've got 6 lines, obviously, which gives us the 64 hexagram combinations. So it ends up showing us these, I guess, these phases of creation or something like that. Is that right? I mean,
It shows the phases of change.
of
It's like,
change.
yeah, like you might have something that's talking about dispersion, 59, change into 44, the shadow, which is like, it's called coming to meet, and it might be a message about what do you need to let go of in order to like stop being so self-defeating? Like, how has your fear of something become this energy in a closet that's, growing and
Wow.
inciting your fear? And, so it's sort of like I see, like people talk about the I Ching having, the first hexagram. Like if you get the 6 lines and no lines are changing, then that hexagram's teaching becomes very important. It's like you need to really stop and work with this. But then generally, I'd say more often than not, lines are changing, which gives you the second hexagram. And a lot of people think that the first hexagram is changing into the second hexagram, but I feel like I have a good relationship with the I Ching, obviously,
Yeah,
because I've been working with it so
of
long. But
course.
I feel like sometimes it's just using the lines as a means to an end. Like I want to show you the 59 dispersion hexagram at the same time as 44 coming to meet. So I need to change line 3 and 4 to get there or whatever. It's like that. So they're not. It's not always changing. Like that's going to be the outcome or whatever. I think they present the lines, present it all together.
So you're saying that rather than it being as again with our modern mind, we may be in that linear chronological. This changes to that mindset, but you're maybe talking about more of a relationship between the two, or a moving in between,
Right.
or a circular motion, or what are we saying here?
Well, I think in the West, we tend to think of time as linear, as if like what's going to happen tomorrow? I'm going to get on the train that's going to lead me to tomorrow, as if I don't have a lot of choices, or, as if today's not important enough to stay here. And in the East, it's different, as you know, probably because you're living in kind of an Eastern culture. It's more like time is circular. Time is, and in the I Ching, I really feel like it's got a real strong sense of wanting to keep putting you back in the moment, taking
Yeah.
responsibility for how you're thinking is influencing the things that you're experiencing. So, time in the East is more a flow of being in the perpetual moment of discovery. Be here now, Ram Dass would say.
Yeah.
Like it's just and so I think that's where I write a lot about joy. That's where you get to joy. In fact, it's Wang Tzu who precedes like Confucius, and they say Lao Tzu wrote the Tao Te Ching, but I don't buy that. There's a lot of redundancy in it, and you can see a lot of other Chinese philosophers in there. But
Oh, really?
Wang Tzu said that identify with the infinite and wander in the unfathomable, or wander in the unfathomable and identify with the infinite.
Wow.
And in those 2 lines, it's such a great snapshot of what I'm saying about in the East being in flow and open to wonder. If you identify with the infinite, that's where I was saying Taoism is that practice of removing boundaries. I'm no different than that leaf I'm looking at that's reaching up to get the sun, so it can eat today. I'm not different from the person that comes on my path that may challenge me, even though I feel like I'm a good person, because nature is balancing opposite energies. Like if it's too hot, the cold system, it pulls the cold system in. They turn around as swirl and dance as wind, and the temperature changes. Everything, what's high comes down, what's low goes up. It's just this thing of balance. So people that have like really spent a lot of time trying to get to a peacefulness and have that sort of nice vibrational energy or whatever, yeah, they might attract a cuckoo ball. Somebody's having a bad day. And a lot of times people on a path of enlightenment don't understand how they get pulled into conflict,
Mm.
when they have everything, which is another thing about Taoism versus Buddhism is, I feel like the Hindu roots of Buddhism, once they moved through China and became Buddhism, you see a lot of Taoist ideas that got blended in there.
Mm.
But the idea of Wu Wei in Taoism, which is effortless action,
Mm.
but you'll hear people say not doing, and the idea of stop, let go of the illusion, meditate, not doing, that comes from Buddhism. They're two very different ideas because in Buddhism, the world of Maya that's happening around us isn't real. Well, in Taoism, like we're in a walking meditation.
Mm.
Everything that we experience is shaping us, just like the wind will carve away a mountain and lift it up, the way the plates shift to bring it to its highest and, most carved beauty.
Wow.
It's like we're being shaped in the same way. And while finding that peaceful center to kind of resonate with, so we can, wander in the unfathomable, not rushing to judgment, I mean, with the infinite, not having classifications in any way. That in fact, that's another thing with Taoism is getting away from extremes. There is no good, bad, right, wrong. Everything's a variation, like the yin and yang.
Mm.
You need them both. So that, they're, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is what you said there. I'm just going back to that for a second of the difference between non-doing and effortless action. I'd love for you to elaborate on that for me because there's something that's really clicking for me around that.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
not doing doesn't mean stopping and not
Right.
taking action.
Mm.
It means to, like, if you can't change the direction of the wind, adjust your sails and let it guide you. So you're still doing something,
Mm.
but you're following.
Mm.
And so the effortless action is how it was. That's not what I planned. Like, I didn't plan this for today. It's taken me down this path, but then that led me to, kind of what happened, what we were talking about earlier, where you don't, things that you don't plan, you don't get upset about it. You just assume it was perfect. That's what led me here, or
Mm.
these things change. And so you can sort of, resonate back to a peacefulness. When you start to see that everything's unfolding perfectly, even if it's not what I would have chosen,
Mm.
and in nature, we are constantly seeing that it doesn't like stagnation. In
Mm.
fact, the coral reefs are bleaching again. We'll probably have a lot of hurricanes, because we have to
Mm.
get the water temperatures back to normal. And even though humans don't like it, sometimes wildfires, have to clear out the way that too many plants growing at once
Mm.
strangle each other, like we don't
Mm.
know. We may not like it, but nature doesn't like stagnation. It's all, or 4 billion years, I think it is, or 6 billion, nature has been perfecting itself and it's been getting better and better. And this is also another beautiful thing that nature teaches us is, in the beginning when it was all bacterias and, it was what we call binary fission, everything was an exact replication of itself. And then some bacteria went inside, a cell, and all of a sudden we have like sexual reproduction, the mixing of, genetic material, and that gave nature the ability to explore possibilities. And so if you think of your genetic line, you are the best of what nature could have created at this very moment. You're not like your siblings because your variation is going to be different unless you're like identicals, twins, I guess. But you're not like your parents. You only have half of each of their DNA. And so here you are, this amazing thing that nature's been working on for 4 billion years. And there you are making your debut, and no one's going to be like you, and I just think that's such a cool feeling
Yeah.
to just know, you got to follow your own drummer.
Mm. Yeah, I love that.
So that's part of Wu Wei too, is like it might be scary to go ahead and say what you feel, but that's your truth.
Wow. Mm. Yeah, it's a beautiful message. And so yeah, I'm thinking about a couple of different things. I'm thinking about direction of time. I heard that I've sort of heard it said that in the West we think about time moving from left to right. That's sort of the image that we have. And in China it was more falling downward. Is that something that you've heard?
No, I think it's more of like the quantum view of the universe, because in fact, a lot of physicists end up really like getting into Taoism. Like I think it was Niels Bohr has the yin and yang emblem on his coat of arms, and it's really kind of the idea. If you think of what Einstein would call space time, time and space, are relative, or that the movement through space can affect time. It's like it's more of like a fabric of stretching and squishing, and I think when you think of like the I Ching or Taoist view of time is just this endless cycle that is the moment in continuum is, I guess, the best way to describe it.
So it's not there's not really a direction, is what you're saying, is this philosophical take.
Yeah, because it would all be kind of relative, I guess, to, either you're in the moment or you're not. I don't know if that sounds severe, but
no, I think there's a truth to that. I think there's, because I'm actually doing a course right now called The Gods of Time with a teacher of mine, Brian Clark, and it's so because we've been reflecting on all these different sort of archetypes that come back to time, and because we're talking about, we're giving dates and we're giving years, and like a few thousand years ago. So there's a sense of that there is a movement of time, and that we reference these numbers and these figures in history. But at the same time, I mean, it's always tricky to talk about, isn't it?
Yeah.
But there's also something of the emergent, and as you're saying, you're either in that river or you're not in that river, or you're stagnating, or you're still, or you're moving, or you're being a part of it, or you're not.
And I guess at some level, you could say that the past, present, and future are existing simultaneously, but we just don't feel that way because, the way the four dimensions of our experience feel like the arrow of time is going just one way, But again, I guess I've done so much work in Taoism where like I said, I think, one of the greatest things that I teach when I work students in Taoism is that letting go of these extremes of one or the other, and just kind of being okay with not knowing, because I think in reality, there's so much that we don't know, even though we have been here for so long with our experiments and ideas and, like even just like Newton and Einstein and their interpretations of gravity and things that we think are great accomplishments can be overthrown, maybe a century later, and so, it doesn't do really any good to get caught up in truth seeking, we can be inspired by the archetypes of time, or all the stories of time or whatever, but I don't think there's a truth, in my opinion. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, although there's something it depends on what we mean by truth, right? Because there's something in the truth of what you said about what was the line that you said about wandering in the unfathomable? Because that's a truth, right? because it's
It's
got
a it's
resonance deep in the
a
heart.
it's a suggestion.
Is it a suggestion?
Yes, it's
Is
wonder and unfathomable and identify with the infinite to get to joy.
to
That
get
to
the
me is a
joy?
recipe. Yeah. Because if you just remember those two things, what is
Yeah.
there to worry about? Like
Mm.
be here and be like, like another thing that I love to write about is the idea that from the moment we took our first breath, we started sharing it with the trees and we go outside and if we're hot and the temperature's cold, we start sharing the energy with the environment, like our heart beats, we shiver when we're cold, we sweat when we're hot. There's so many things going on in our body that we don't even think about,
Yeah.
and so that's like, why worry? Like,
Mm.
and if our moment comes where it's time to see what's next, I suspect it's going to be something interesting, like, but I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. Amazing. I mean, I think there's a definition in here of what I feel is truth, is just a resonance, like a resonance field. As you say, it's a suggestion. Yes, that's a suggestion, but still I feel a truth in the beauty of it, a poetic truth, I guess, that
Hmm.
it speaks to, and it's always refreshing. It's like soul nourishment to me to hear a yeah, a philosophical truth that is sort of underneath all of that. And of course, yeah, it gets into multiple discussions about what that means. But isn't that
Especially when,
also, yeah, go on.
especially, I was just going to say, especially when it's simple, like
Yeah.
when it's simple, is when it's really beautiful.
Yeah. And that's what always struck me about the Tao Te Ching. It just those first lines,
I
which maybe
know.
you have a translation for the first,
Uh-huh.
could you share those with us? Because I just love them.
Yeah, I mean, the Tao that can be named is not the constant Tao.
How good is
I
that?
mean, it's
That's
just,
like, is that the
I mean,
greatest start to a text
that's
ever?
what the, in fact, my translation of that text, I actually put like I can't remember because I wrote that book, gosh, it had to be 20 years ago, but I think in the table of contents or something, the way that it's laid out, it almost sounds like its own poem, like it's these little
Mm.
snippets. The whole book is like hinting at what you can't know, but yet you can sense it's really cool. Like it never gets to,
It never
it
gets
never
there.
gets to it because that's the whole beauty of it. It teaches you to follow, to anticipate,
Yeah.
anticipate the sense of wonder, like, and when it talks about, seeing the great mystery, or crossing the great river, of awareness. Like I talk about Taoism as also learning how to just stay before you go past your nose, just stay there and witness and, don't embroil and push and,
Mm.
no matter what's happening, just kind of be the observer and, you know, and I think, the as the book of changes, the I Ching is all about, it's not going to stay the same, so don't get hung up on it. It's always
Mm.
changing. And then the Tao Te Ching is, well, let's try to describe it. Like, what is Tao? Well, Tao shows itself in the yin and yang. One of the most beautiful expressions of yin and yang in nature, in my opinion, is electromagnetism, because you've
Mm.
got something that feels yang, like a charge, that creates a field that's like the yin, that pulls the charge forward, that creates another field, that creates, on and on and on. And the speed of light through our universe is using, electromagnetism and setting what we understand, time to be. You know what I mean? The way it moves through. And so Tao it's not a religion, it's not a deity, it doesn't have
Yeah.
that same Western sort of interpretation. It's more of like the sense of knowing that there's just, like I said, for billions of years, this energy that wants to, is it good or bad? I can't say, but it sure feels like it's benevolent. It
Mm.
sure feels like it's trying to heal and make
Mm.
everything better, and even like I feel like a humor in it all at times,
Yeah.
giggling back when we get full of ourselves, or
Mhm.
you know, I feel like so describing that energy is kind of what we get caught up in quantum physics.
Mm.
It's a difficult idea to wrap your brain around.
Very.
But those ideas came from so long ago, things that we're only now, you know, kind of tapping into and understanding,
Yeah. I wonder how it happens that whenever I'm kind of contemplating that Taoist philosophy, it makes me wonder how we could ever. It's almost so all encompassing that you can't imagine that we could get out of that way of being. But then my observation in the world is that we've lost the way of the Tao in a lot of ways, in the Western world at least.
Which kind of brings me to, the book I wrote about Babylonian astrology, because, have you ever read a book by Julian Jaynes called The Origin of Consciousness?
No,
and the
I
breakdown
haven't. No.
and the breakdown of the bicameral mind. It's a book I read years ago, and as I've been a dream analyst, and as I've been kind of examining the profound way that people are guided in their dreams. Like, again, I'm working with so many people. They're telling me these dreams that make no sense to them. And yet I can see some part of themselves talking to them, guiding them, giving them instruction. Where is it coming from? Like where is this wisdom coming from? And what this guy, Julian Jaynes, he was a psychology professor at, I think, Princeton, Yale. And he put, and this is a book written in the 70s, then he put forth the idea that in ancient man, and I'm touching on this because of what you said, how did we let go of these great, wisdoms and ideas? But in ancient man, the pre-literate humans, he suggests that they had a bicameral, that the left and right hemispheres weren't synchronized like they are today. And that, they had done some split brain surgeries on schizophrenic patients, not schizophrenic, patients with epilepsy. And each side of the brain is mapping to the other side. Like if something, your right eye is controlled in the occipital lobe of the left side, or, it's kind of going, except the Wernicke of language, it doesn't really seem to have that same contralateral mapping. And when they stimulated it, the people heard music and voices, like they, so, and his idea was that in those, before language, there was no consciousness of ego and self and I'm doing this. They really believed that the gods were talking to them. And he even suggests that the Iliad and the Homeric, works, the way they describe that this hero or person did this because this, like they really might have been experiencing that. Yeah. And that may sound outlandish, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think there was a time when we were not so left brain consumed. And in fact, I tell people when I'm working with them on their dreams that the reason we don't remember our dreams is that we're dreaming more in the right brain. It's all visual, symbolic driven imagery. And then as we wake up, we go back to the left, which has a lot to do with tasks and survival, and it's words, and just that whatever it is just shuts away all that stuff that we had just been, tapping into in our dreams. And so imagine a time when we weren't so consumed with consciousness that, even the cave paintings might have been our first expression of consciousness, who knows, but I feel that a lot of the ideas, the reason that they're so profound is because we had access to what maybe Carl Jung would have called the collective unconscious by day. We were getting that same guidance. I mean, I see it in the dreamscape. What if it was something that was happening all day? So I think the way society has us like working for a living, whatever, the complication, mass media, the fear machines, all the things that go on, we're just not able to, reach for that inspiration.
Yeah, it makes me wonder about that shift through human history of writing things down, because you bring in the Iliad and ancient texts that so then we make that movement to recording or to writing things down. which kind of stores our memory now in these tablets or forms, or nowadays the internet, Google has our memory for us now, that kind of thing. And
Right.
and if we can, which we obviously can, because as you're saying, time doesn't really work that way. So we can also undo all of that, I mean, in the individual consciousness much more easily than the collective, I think. But taking ourselves back to the pre-literal, whether that's in our own development, psychic development, or human development, or even cultural development, and then find our way to work with these images, which I really do feel it does reignite the gods in a way. Like
Yeah, exactly.
you allow them to just speak to you again, and then not think that you're crazy. If you can make that leap to allow the
And
gods to speak.
all
Yeah,
artists are doing that,
right, of course.
they're opening into the inspiration. So in that book I was mentioning, when I started working with Babylonian astrology, or looking at the symbols that became, Western astrology, one of the things that was most fascinating was coming across. Have you ever heard of Göbekli Tepe in
No.
Turkey, which would have been ancient Anatolia? So there's these monoliths, or similar to like the Stonehenge, these big upward standing sort of things that a lot of times are built or erected, to watch activity. But in these particular case, this is dated back 10,000 years, like before written records. Like our
Wow.
written records, 1,000, 2,500. Some of the oldest books that we have would be the I Ching, the Bhagavad Gita, the actually traces back to the Epic of Gilgamesh. So we know what our most ancient writings are, and yet there's this what they call the vulture stone. Is got like it's got a scorpion design with what I see as ziggurats, which have the resurrection of the sun through the mountains was a big theme back in Egyptian and Babylonian times, and then what they think is a vulture playing with was actually Thoth from Egypt, like the ibis-headed god of, that was also part of the resurrection of the sun. Now we're talking 10,000 years ago, when the height, or what we know of the Egyptian civilization, was in 2,500, BC. And so there's just like these things that you come across. Ratnagiri in India. There's the Pisces glyph, even with the little ribbon,
Really?
that little. There's things that we find. I think the Dendera zodiac in Egypt is, we can make more sense of that because we had astrology around for a little time. And the one thing I'll say about Babylonian astrology is we're going back to like 2,500, 3,000, or let's say we're 2,000 years before the Greeks. So the ideas were much different. The way that their star catalog, I believe, well, I know that that the Egyptians borrowed astronomy from Babylon, and then the Greeks were in Egypt later studying astronomy. And so, some of these ideas made their way into Greece, and Greece, I think a lot of the mythologies, the stories, things that were originally in the way Sumerian words could be described in different ways, so it's kind of like there's this amazing vision that these Sumerians had that then became the Babylonians, the Akkadian, the Egyptian gave it to the Greeks, and then we get our astrology, which came much later.
Right. And can
But
you
like
open up some of
elaborate.
these images from, because I'd love to go into, obviously, a large part of my podcast here focuses on Greek mythology and astrology.
Right,
And
I know you love that.
I love
I know.
that.
So you and I do too. I mean, it's like, I feel like the inspiration that was coming to these early astrologers, astronomers, whatever, was not like rocks moving through space. Like
Yeah.
they were having an imaginative connection. And the
Yeah.
best way I could describe it is that, when people ask me about astrology, it's like when an astrologer is reading a chart, it's like reading a language. Each little glyph, the planet, the house, what type, the type of aspect, it starts to tell a story, and it's engaging kind of and the imagination. Like probably you would agree, Chris, I'm not sure, but
Definitely,
when you
yeah.
first learned about Jupiter, you have your own like deep relationship with how you see it playing out in different people's charts. It's different for everyone, right?
Yeah.
Like there so first of all, I always say like astrology is not astronomy and it's not
Mm.
based on the rocks in the sky, but somehow that it infused this story. And then, of course, after 2,500 years of practice, it's proven to keep entertaining us, we might say,
Yeah.
or working. But anyway, the original version of, the Babylonian star catalog would have put like Aries, which in the Greco-Roman world became much more associated with the war deity, like Mars, and like when you think of Aries and its assertiveness, and when you go back to Babylon, it was really based on the story of Dumuzi and Inanna, and Inanna's one fascinating. One thing I love about Sumerian literature, like the Epic of Gilgamesh and Inanna's descent to the underworld, or you know prefers the farmer over the over
Yeah.
the shepherd or something. They're
Yeah.
really the humor and also the eroticism. There's eroticism. There's a poem where she's um, talking to what I see as the archetype for Aries, to Mused, the farm worker, and she's saying like, who will plow my fields? Who will basically plow my vulva? Like it was a
Hmm.
very erotic,
Mm.
sort of thing. And in the British Museum, there's actually a statue called Ram in the Thicket. And even if you go now and look online at the British Museum, they're not mentioning this this poem. They still think it's,
Yeah.
the Golden Fleece, maybe from Greek times, or
Yeah.
but but you can see the phallicness of the statue and the way it's standing up against the thicket, against the weeds and stuff. So, but in that poem, Aries does assumptive closing techniques. Like it's Aries. I'm sorry, Demused he's the shepherd and the farmer, and they're going back and forth about marrying and Nana. And even though the guy, he's basically saying, well, once we get married, you'll be our best friend, or I don't know. It definitely has the Aries qualities of aggressiveness and pompousness, and the things that drive Aries to like just keep going, go, 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 but it has kind of a different origin. And then
Mm.
Libra, I think we talked about this before, but Libra was called the ravening dogs. And if you think about, the zodiac zoology, there really weren't the inanimate, things, you know,
Mm.
the scales didn't actually come until it kind of was more adopted into the Greek world. At the
Right.
time, it was the claws of Scorpio
Mm.
that that was kind of the Libra area. And remember, when you think of an astrological chart, it has an ascendant and a descendant. And so the reason it was the ravening dogs is because the seventh house starts the journey to the underworld.
Mm.
Like it's where it's not me anymore. Like,
Right.
and it's all about the other. And
Mm.
is it the other? Is it me? Is it projection? So they saw it more as, the dogs were actually, they would accompany people through the underworld. Dogs were really respected. You saw them a lot with the deities.
Mm.
Yeah, of course, they probably saw them carrying away dead bodies, you know,
Right.
back in those days. And they had actually little dog statues that would protect them in their homes. Um, but, the seventh house, before it gets into the eighth house, which we definitely associate with that deeper, it
Yeah.
is the Scorpion and
Yeah.
Pluto and deeper transformation. But it begins, kind of in the seventh house. But one thing too is, the idea of Ma'at from Egypt is she's kind of like, she weighs the the hearts or souls of people in the underworld, and it needs to be the weight of a feather, and
Mm.
and we get the idea of the lightness of being, and that's really, another archetype for Libra, is that sense of, keeping it light and harmonious, not wanting to rock the boat. And sometimes Libra can get into sensory overload. Like if they happen to be in an environment where there's a lot of discord, they might start using alcohol or,
Yeah.
whatever. And so when I hear the hair of the dog,
Yeah, right.
and it's like the dog, so what I found is each of the signs kind of had a different flavor, than the way that we understand it. And that was kind of what the book was, to kind of give a little bit more of a background on the archetypes. And another part, the last quadrant, 10th to the 12th house, was viewed as the sea. Like there are Sumerian words like cut off her head or the whale, swallow, like all these words are in like the soup of imagery that you can see how later the man who gets swallowed by a whale or Perseus or, the constellations that didn't really exist for them. In fact, what they had over there, the square of Pegasus, was a square called the field, Mul Iku. And it was, and if it's a beautiful constellation. If you look for Pegasus and you see the big square, it's like a perfect square up there. And it's like, it was the place where they believed that the maze, the records of fate or whatever, that they believed it was like there in that square. And they used it as kind of like, this is where you start when you're going to try to understand the stars. Or, imagine like a cuneiform text up there. Because if you've ever seen cuneiform, it looks like stars. Now imagine that you're in the process of developing this language, or I don't know, you start reading these stars, you are, inspired with these different ideas. You'd have to know cuneiform, I guess, to be able to see how they can have these different meanings. But what I found fascinating is some of the statues. Have you ever heard of the man purses, the man bags?
No.
Look this up sometime because it's really cool. You see it in the Aztec world, might be Quetzalcoatl, and you see it in the Akkadian, Assyrian statues, where you see like the man statue, god, deity, whatever, carrying a purse.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, it's on the cover of that book that I wrote on Babylonian astrology.
Okay.
I use it, and people have tried to like, what are those things? Or like some people have said it's a battery, like an ancient battery, or and what I think it is, the Magi, the Chaldeans, the people that were astronomers, magicians, whatever you wanted to call them at the time, they used that square to understand the stars, and I think that square bag is symbolic of that, carrying that with them.
Wow.
That's kind of how I saw it, but it's kind of a cool thing.
Yeah, and then as you say, the cutting off the head and the Medusa and Perseus story and that being led into the Pegasus, and so then we still have something of that in that square in the
well,
the
it
Pegasus.
Came later.
Yeah, it comes later,
but it came
still
later.
holds it, maybe.
But because the original in the people, let's say the deities that lived in that last quadrant, the Great Sea, would have been, one was Enki, Ea, like it had different names, but he was like water's going over his shoulder as he's climbing a mountain. Like in the Sumerian world, the earth was flat, the river was underneath it, and then the mountain was kind of above it. And again, the mountain was a really important part of the sun's resurrection every day. And the sun was an important deity to them, Shamash, And so this Enki can go up the mountain, but can also go underwater. That's where you get the fish-tailed goat. That's where you get Capricorn.
Right.
The symbolism, of it. So it's kind of like, you kind of have to go back to the ancient stories. Like, I was arguing one day with somebody about Shakespeare, and they're like, "Oh, you're crazy. It's the greatest. It was the greatest books ever read, or the greatest literature out there, Shakespeare." And I'm like, "No, the greatest book out there is the Epic of Gilgamesh. It cracks me up every time I read it, and it's written so. I just love the style of it, and I feel like." Because like it's these ancient stories that came out of that area that allow me to understand like kind of the astrology symbols. Does that make sense? Like
Yeah.
you get like kind of in the same way I did with the I Ching with the ancient philosophers. I felt like it was really understanding their ancient stories that allowed me to kind of piece together these different things.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you enter their world and inhabit it rather than necessarily nut it out and understand it. It's like it invites you in, and you take that invitation and you enter that really fully through the, as you say, it cracks you up, so it's got a humor
Yeah.
to it, and it's you enjoy it, right? And
Uh-huh.
that's probably how you
But
gather so
even
much up.
yeah, but even writing the book,
Mm,
Decoding the Night Sky, it infused me. Like I
mm.
went there, I was
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
It was, I mean, I think I started writing that book and was done with it in like 4 or 5 months. Or you know
Huh.
what I mean? Like, like it was such a ride. And I
Yeah.
always say that, like a lot of times that the mythology of sleep, which is a book, that looks at different mythologies around the world and for the dreamscape to understand the archetypes that inspire our dreams. It was the same way. I kind of followed it
Mm.
through, or so I feel like I have kind of a good conduit in my right brain.
Yeah, it sounds like
I
it
can
for
still
sure.
excellent.
Yeah, but obviously you
Yeah.
store it as well. You have a lot
Now,
of, yeah.
what sign are you? What's your sun sign?
My sun sign's Cancer, and my
Oh,
moon
okay.
is in Pisces, and then I have a Sagittarius rising with
Wow.
a few Leo parts. So like my Mercury and Jupiter are in Leo in the ninth. So that's my combos.
Yeah,
My
nice
uh, my
blend.
son's in the eighth. My son in Cancer's in the eighth. There's a little kind of expose of me to my audience. Thank you for that.
Well, yeah, it's a big-hearted thinker, right?
Yeah, a bit like
Like,
that. Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
I have a lot of Aries. Well, I'm a
yeah.
Gemini with the Aries rising and Aries moon.
The
So I feel
Gemini and the
like,
Aries and the Taurus too, right?
well, I have like Mars and Taurus, but
Oh, okay.
I have
Yeah.
a grand water trine that kind of gives me sort of
Mm.
my ability to do healing work. But I feel like it's the Gemini and the Aries is why I go pioneering off into the crazy places like gathering information. And I was writing about dreams before people thought dreams had any relevance. I remember
Mm.
talking to a publisher 20 years ago, and he's like, "You're what? Your book's about what?" Like,
Yeah,
"Oh,
right.
you're from California." That's what he said. "You're from California." It's like, and now, everybody will agree that there's some kind of interesting thing happening when we're dreaming. You know, the people that go on ayahuasca journeys or
Yeah.
psilocybin,
Yeah.
they're seeing that there is some part of our mind that is, able to heal us or guide us. And
Yeah.
the same thing happens to the human brain on on psilocybin and DMT that happens when we dream. Did you know that?
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Which is what I think comes back when I've been tracing, and of course it has got deeper roots, but the Asclepian temples and Asclepian dream work and so that's one of the deities I've been really spending a lot of time with over the last few years. These places like Epidaurus, and of course, that probably the next level of opening that up for me would be to go deeper into the Asclepian tradition and where its roots are in the Babylonian and Sumerian and of course Egyptian, because ultimately what is that process from the Greeks is to take you into the dreaming and then to be around those non-venomous snakes, and also dogs are again sacred to Asclepius, and so you get that sense of the dogs or the snakes are going to enter the
Hmm.
dreaming and perform the healing or show you the way in your everyday life to really make that healing last. And I love that image because to me, Freud and Jung were both Asclepiads, and I think as Asclepian traditions are still very much alive in the world today, but maybe just a little bit more hidden and underneath
Hmm.
the veil of rationality and having to explain everything away through rational materialism and science and what have you. But
Hmm.
that those traditions still are here, and that's what always makes, because what is it that we're doing with the dreams? I think is to re-enter the timeless, or re-enter the broad oceanic imagination, and then bring it back to our time-bound lives, and hopefully have a deeper experience of just how magical this whole place is, and how beautiful it all is, and how we can really assist with the creation of more beauty on this planet, rather than building big block stores of, Best Buys and things. And
right?
there may be a better
Filling
way.
our emptiness with things.
Yeah, filling our emptiness with things. Exactly.
Well, I like to view the dreaming process as it's like nature's evolutionary mechanism. It's the only
Mm,
way that we can be jarred out of our, you know, past way of thinking. We can get stuck.
mm.
Everything is ego driven. It pokes its little head up to make sure everything's safe. What's wrong? And when we dream, all that's gone. And now it's
Mm.
like, let's get back to your Te. You know the word Te from like the Tao Te Ching.
Oh, what is that
Te,
word?
Te, it's, well, some people translate it as virtue, but I translate it as your blueprint. It's like
Mm,
your Te is Tao active in the individual. So you're following some inner drummer of,
mm.
like anything that makes you passionate, do it. That's you. It doesn't matter if nobody else is doing it. Like those are
Yeah,
the things that are part of your Te,
yeah,
so, and I feel like we connect with it, when we dream, we get back to what, the, the ways of undoing the conformity that we're taught.
yeah. Because I mean, ultimately, we leave behind a lot of identities in there, and we shapeshift and change, and that's why
Hmm.
Morpheus in the Greek was the god of dreaming.
Hmm.
So it's all morphing and changing and moving around, and the Matrix Morpheus is also trying to show us what's available just beyond this everyday world and beyond the machine world, as their metaphor was in 1999. But I want to come back because I am really interested in, you said, the last quadrant of the zodiac, and you mentioned that in the email that you sent as well. It's a fascinating thing that they all are associated with water in that last
Hmm.
quadrant in the ancient texts. As you said,
Hmm.
you had the river under the mountain, which actually brings me back to Hercules' first labor, where he's in a tunnel under the mountain wrestling a giant lion,
Hmm.
which also has that image, kind of Capricornian, actually. I was only thinking about that this morning. But Capricorn, also the sea goat. But you had another image for us of somebody climbing a mountain with water flying over them.
That was the original Capricorn was
Wow.
the Ea, Ea or Enki, sometimes called Enki, was the original deity that of Sumeria, and he would climb a mountain with water pouring over his shoulder. But even though it starts to take on the shape of Aquarius as well,
Yeah.
right? The water
Yeah.
bearer, but it's sort of like what later became like, I mean, the Babylonians had the 12, they had divided the horoscope into 12 houses and all that. The constellations took some time to congeal, to sort of like become as defined as what we have today. But you
Right.
can, see how they kind of move through the different shape shifting.
Mm. So then that figure, and then do you then know what they had as the Aquarian symbol, if that's not the Aquarian symbol?
Well, okay, so Enki would have been more of the fish goat, right?
Yeah.
That became the fish goat, and then as it transformed more into Ea, because Enki was then later known as Ea, you
Uh-huh.
get the Aquarian, water going over the shoulder, water pourer,
Yeah.
back then, or Aquarian was ruled by Saturn before Uranus
Yeah.
was discovered, so it's kind of had more of that, disciplinarian,
Mm.
like do this and do it, structure type
Yes.
stuff before Aquarius became so scientific.
Yeah. And then, of course, it becomes the fish of Pisces.
Mhm.
Um,
And Pisces was actually the great swallow back then, and then the fish. But there was the idea that the celestial equators right there, like one
mm,
fish is swimming in one one dimension, let's say, and the other is here in You know what I mean? The celestial equator sort
Right.
of separated the earth from the heavens. And in fact, that the things that would happen at the celestial equator would become very important, the great
Mm-hmm.
years and all of that. Um,
Mm. Fascinating. And
yeah.
so we've got that watery sort of finish to the zodiac. I do want to come back to those two dogs for a second though, because that is such a in some
Well,
ways
another one
wildly
though,
well.
since you're a Cancer,
Yeah.
the Cancer was actually the deceptor, and it was
Say
like
that again. Your connection went out. Cancer was the what?
sorry, deceptive digger. It was a turtle. It was a turtle. And it's funny because if you look at the Kuduro boundary stones of the cardinal directions, there is no crab, you know. So there's a
Ah.
sense of like a sea creature. But there's a story about the turtle who's like harassing, molesting a little bit the heron, you know, and he keeps digging up his little eggs and stuff. And it's a funny little story. You know, I'm a turtle, I'm an oven brick, and I'm going to pick a quarrel. But it cancer receptive digger because of that story. Anyway, but you asked about the dogs again for Libra. I just wanted to mention because you said you were a Cancer that
Well, no, I love
um
that. I love this
and
turtle.
so
Yeah.
there's you'll see the goatfish, you'll see, you know, the other cardinal signs but you see the turtle as opposed to the crab
That's amazing
back
because
then.
of the link to the Homeric hymn to Hermes. You know,
Hmm.
the first thing that he does essentially is he interacts with the tortoise, which he finds hilarious. That there's a turtle out in the mountains. That's the thing that he finds really funny. He's like, "You're a turtle, but you're in the mountains. It's amazing." And then
Well,
he,
I know. I really feel like they were inspired a lot by some of this
yeah,
that traveled through to them, you know.
yeah, definitely.
And you know, in the Native American tradition, there's the idea that, you know, that the turtle's carrying the world on its back.
Mm,
The turtle is like the representative of home. I think that's where you get Cancer rule in the fourth house and,
mm.
you know, things that relate to home.
Yeah, and the slowness and the carrying the home on his back kind of thing,
Hmm.
which is similar to the crab in its own way.
Hmm.
And then yeah, I just think that there's this link between Hermes and there's a strange link that I've been tracking between Hermes and Cancer. Um,
Oh, that may be why.
yeah, that may be why, because he was also associated, we typically think with the number three, but also the number four.
Hmm.
And of course, Cancer is the fourth sign. And this relationship
And
with the,
you said, did
yeah,
you say you had a Pisces moon? Is
I
that
do,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, so I could totally see you like not even having to read to find this stuff. Like you
Yeah.
could open your, in fact, right now, that's what I think the Jupiter Saturn conjunction, if it's in an important, you know, place in your chart,
Jupiter,
I
Uranus, you
think,
mean?
yeah, isn't that what I said?
You
What I
Jupiter,
say?
Saturn? Yeah.
Oh no, I'm sorry, I meant Jupiter Uranus.
Yeah.
So I see it as a download, and
Yeah.
you with your, you know, Pisces moon, like Pisces aren't really here anyway.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, they're really like picking up all of this great, wonderful stuff. So,
Yeah. Well, that the conjunction happens for me in between my sun and my moon in a way that which are both at 21 degrees, 21, 22
mm,
degrees. So the Taurus one is happening kind of linking those two together, which is quite a nice image, you know,
mhm,
as the sextile between the two, and
mhm,
and quite a nice way in a sense to open up this new season of the show. And I'm so glad
mhm.
that you could come on to help me open it up because it feels like you've you know, the whole thing this year is going to be a year of myth. I'm sort of moving gently away from the astrology and more into the mythic, although astrology will be no doubt popping its head in wherever it wants to. And I'm totally open to that and wanting that because I love astrology. But I also think that the system of the 12 is like there's a 13th thing. And that's the thing that I want to get into this year of the 13th thing of all these other images. Like I love the ones that you're bringing of, to me, Libra is two ravenous dogs. It's just, I'm going to be using that a lot because I kind of need my Libra clients to hear that. You know, I need them to be
and
not an
also
inanimate object.
and the descendant, Like we
And
don't think of
yeah,
Libra, we don't think of the dark side of Libra, you
mm,
know?
yeah,
And
it
it's
is
like
descending.
that's where it all changes. We go from,
Mm.
we make our public debut in the 10th, but there's a lot of digging going on in the, seventh, eighth, ninth,
Of
right?
course.
We sort of make it into philosophy in the ninth, and we
Yeah,
get really deep in the eighth, but we cross the border, you
right.
know?
Because essentially, as you're saying, Libra is in between its setting. So it's got that sort of descendant and descending, much like
Mhm.
Inanna on the one side of it,
Mhm.
going down into the
Into the
under the
underworld,
horizon, but also the eighth
right?
house of the underworld. So it's really caught in between, isn't it?
Hmm.
Those two
Yep.
dogs. And that does take me to Cerberus, but how does Cerberus get a third head
Same
then?
thing. They're guardians of the underworld.
Guardians of
They
the
don't
underworld,
let
yeah.
people go. They don't want people poking around where they're not ready to
Yeah.
be poking
Oh my
around.
God. Okay. So then Libra is sort of there to help us weigh our heart against that feather and
Exactly.
and just wait until the underworld sort of draws you in, or the claws of the scorpion, which I've also been
Or
tracking.
better yet, the relationship with the other. What is more
Mm.
powerful than falling in love?
Oh my
You know,
God.
you
That's
want
why I
to
love the
dig
claws
down.
of the scorpion analogy.
I know it is. It's so, isn't that perfect?
It's so perfect.
I mean, you can see where it became the scales, like, the
Yeah.
justice balance, the equinox happens during
Yeah.
that time, but yeah, there's definitely much more meat in there. Bless you. Are you sneezing?
No, I just had water and it went down the wrong way slightly. So I'm just coughing a little, but don't worry about me. Yeah, I just think about that's such a great image that it's the claws of the scorpion because we fall in love and everything's rosy and beautiful. And then it's like, okay, well, yeah, for a little bit. And then we can go into
Right.
the what's really going
Right.
on, the shadows, the
Mhm.
reflections, the
Mhm.
the drawing into the enmeshments and the underworld
Right.
themes of Scorpio and entanglements and quantum entanglements and all of these things
Mhm.
that
And
are sort of
it can get quite erotic and messy
anaerotic
and
and
like
messy. Yeah.
mine in the eighth. But just
Yeah.
in the seventh, there's a lot of shadow work. People that have fear of intimacy that are blaming, oh, why does he keep leaving? Because you didn't want him to stay. You picked the exact guy that doesn't want to stay, because you don't want him either. Like
Oh
the
my
shadow, the
God.
not me, the
Yeah,
mirror.
that can't be me. That cannot
Yeah.
be me. The house of the not me, as I call it in the seventh. That's not me. Oh, amazing. Well, Carrie, I feel like we could talk for another 5 hours at least. I'd love to have you back on the show sometime if you're willing to
That'd
come
be
back.
great. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love where you're at too. Like I love,
Yeah.
because not a lot of people are into all of these myth. Because to me, astrology and mythology are born of the same seed. You know,
Yes, I agree. Yeah. I mean, quite clearly, right? They are the
Mhm.
you had to sort of have both in some ways. That
To
split that
appreciate
happens in the 18th
these.
or 17th or 18th century, where it becomes very clearly delineated this is astronomy and this is astrology. But it never really sticks, that kind of thing, because when we find a new planet, we have to go back to the classics. Like if you find a new astral body, otherwise, either you're going to name it like A2397, A56, or you're going to go back to the classics and look at where it is and name it, just like the
But
naming of,
they have their own life in the same way like Pluto got demoted. Of course he got demoted. He
of
lives
course, he
underground,
loves
but
it.
he's so
Yeah.
powerful.
Well, that's the whole
And
sort of like the greatest trick the devil is ever pulled is to convince the world he isn't real, right? Like that to me
right.
is the yeah, I don't want to be a planet. Make me a dwarf planet. Actually, you should just forget that there's anything here. There's nothing actually
And to
here.
me, in a chart, I look at Pluto first because I see like
Wow.
I see the evolutionary true north with the
Yes.
north node, but Pluto tells me a lot about the house and sign. Obviously the signs are not going to change for generations, but
Yeah.
the house and what it's doing tells me a lot about their life path.
Yeah,
To
and
me, it's
also what their generation is up against, right,
yeah,
as well. So that
exactly
that can be
right.
very valuable. Um, yeah, I love that. Well, I can
But
see your, yeah, go on.
I was just going to say, I love it when people like want to argue about the lack of science in astrology. And I have to remind them, this is not a science. It's like an inspired realm of archetypes. You know what I mean? It's like
Mm,
the same way that we would say dreams aren't real. Well, yeah, but they have meaning. They
yeah,
work,
yeah.
you know. So,
Yeah, and
I
I
mean,
think
people
we
who
can
want to
have
get caught
a,
up, yeah.
yeah, go on.
Nothing. I'm just saying people that want to get caught up in the rocks going through space. Well, we're not.
Yeah. Well, I think, the beauty is that we can have actually, as I feel in you, a very scientific disposition when we approach this stuff, because actually there is a sifting and sorting that's going on, and it is a scientific process. I think it's just not the way that we would imagine science to be in this era, but that's a very limited kind of narrow view of what science might be, kind of like the children of Uranus or the Cyclopses, right? As this
Right.
one-eyed view, no depth perception.
Or the way that like the Newtonian world got shattered by the, quantum physics, or, like this
Mm,
cold mechanical world turned
right.
into probabilities,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
so
And
so
then,
science is a little bit nebulous, like superstring theory. How can that be? You know what I mean?
right, and then
I get it, but so it's kind
the
of
myth of the objective observer, this mythic figure that has never ever happened.
right.
But we still strive towards an objective observer. Mm,
Right.
interesting. Well, I can already see several other dream doors opening up for us, but let's not take them today, but maybe pick them up another time. But Carrie, I just want to really thank you for everything you brought to the show. I do feel that there's at least 8 questions that I still want to ask in this moment, but
Not
I'm going to leave
13.
them. Not 13 right now. There's 8.
Well,
There's the
great.
underworld 8th house that I would love to keep wandering around, especially just to track the more explicit and sexual kind of component and erotic
Of
component of
Babylon. Yeah.
Babylon. Yeah,
No
that
wonder they thought it was so nasty.
yeah, yeah, and then clean it up. Get puritanical
Right.
about it, and we don't want to have any of those things like a plowed field and ravenous dogs and the way everything gets
Right.
edited out, because that's apparently what we need,
Right.
Disneyified or whatever it might be. Um, but yeah, I will leave all those questions for now, because otherwise we may never stop. But I just want to thank you for, it's been a real pleasure, and I love how many places that your Gemini mind goes, and obviously that water grand trine helps you get the soul of it all as well. So thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me on your show. And it was really a pleasure getting to know you as well. I look
Yeah.
forward to another time.
Yes. Well, let's do a part 2 soon.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thanks, Gary.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to On the Soul's Terms podcast. To support the show, please consider leaving a 5-star review, sharing with friends, or becoming a patron at patreon.com/onthesoulsterms. Until next time.